The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline, a Phoenix Suns podcast. Back with an episode. Sam, we waited to see if there was going to be any Bradley Beal news, but we couldn't wait any longer. Here we are recording before any buyout. My name is Mike. How you doing, Sam?
Hi, I am glad to be back. I was out in the woods this weekend, and so I'm kind of glad that the news did not break while I was unavailable to record. However, at the same time, you're totally right, Mike. We have just been caught in this holding pattern, waiting for the news that all of us kind of just assume is official, but hasn't technically broken yet. So I think we're going to talk about it on this podcast, the obvious Bradley Beal buyout, because it's the main thing that everyone's thinking about, right? But we do need to stress that it's not official yet, and yeah, the news is probably going to break like an hour after we post this, if I'm being honest. We just felt like we could not wait anymore for this episode. It's been like over a week.
Yes, and so just so everyone gets caught up on what's happening here, in case you properly took a vacation over the 4th of July weekend, there's been a lot of smoke about a Bradley Beal buyout. The Bradley Beal resolution, I think, is how Gambo phrased it on his Twitter, but it doesn't seem to be any trade is going to be available for the Suns. And I can assure you, even though there's not a lot of reporting on this right now, they tried. They for sure looked for any opportunity to trade him. So what does that mean? That means he will likely be bought out. And, on the other side of that, it will likely be stretched. That money will likely be stretched over a 5-year period. So what does that mean? Just so everyone understands the rules that go into this. I know most people listening probably do. But the Suns cannot buy Bradley Beal out, or cannot stretch Bradley Beal's contract without buying out, without Bradley Beal giving back some percentage of the money. Because if you stretch any money over the course of a long time, you can't have over 15% of your cap being dead money, because it's such a large contract to start, but there's also some little dead money on the Suns cap currently.
Yep.
They have to have him give some money back and then waive and stretch that over the course of a 5-year period in order to get under the second apron. This is what we
And in case you're wondering, just real quick, in case you're wondering why is it a 5-year period, couldn't they just stretch it so that it was less money over a longer period? The waive and stretch rules are very clear. You're taking the existing contract and you're doubling the years plus one. So if a guy has 1 year left, you're stretching him over 3 years. If a guy has 2 years left on his contract, you're stretching that dead money out over 5 years. So that's why Bradley Beal has 2 years left on his contract. They will pay that out over 5 years. It's the exact same situation, if you've been following, of what the Milwaukee Bucks are about to do with Damian Lillard, because they, in a sort of surprising move, just waive and stretched Lillard in order fully to make room for that Miles Turner move. Yeah. But also allowing them to probably do something else on the side, including possibly sign Bradley Beal after he's bought out by the Suns. So that's kind of an interesting side piece to this.
Yeah. And in their case, they did not have to, Damian Lillard did not have to give up any money, so there was no negotiations involved. The Bucks could just do that and not have to talk to Damian Lillard about it. In the case for the Suns, they actually have to have an open dialogue with Bradley Beal, because Bradley Beal has to give up a certain amount of money in order for it to be worth it for the Suns. Now, that amount of money can be various different amounts in order for the Suns essentially to get it to where they're under the second apron. This is all very boring, I understand, but it's also an important time to talk about this. But in order for it actually to happen in a way for the Suns to get under the second apron, the number that's been floated around that he could potentially give up is around just under $14 million. This is the number that's been floating around for a while. If he gives up that amount of money, the Suns can waive and stretch him. It opens up some avenues once the Suns are under the second apron for options in this current season. Now, we have talked about the possibility of a waive and stretch, a buyout plus a waive and stretch. Like, that's ultimately what it is. It's a buyout and then waiving and stretching the amount of money that he has bought out on that contract over the course of 5 years. We talked about that on the podcast before. We don't have to go over it in great detail. I think it's a bad idea to put any money on the books in the future for this team in order to maximize what you're doing in this upcoming season. Just from a general perspective, I don't think the Suns are good enough to make sacrifices in the future, essentially to borrow from the future in order to maximize the team now. I just don't think this team has enough talent to start doing that. I think it's almost better to retreat a little bit by trading somebody like Grayson Allen or Royce O'Neal to save money and try and get under the second apron that way. And at that point, just play Bradley Beal, right? And maybe, or even like waive and stretch him next year so it's just 1 year. I know it's still a similar amount of money, but like do something that makes it less impactful, or potentially even trade him in the middle of the year, trade him in the future if a team becomes desperate enough to do that now. It doesn't seem as though that's the Suns' plans. It seems like it's something that they want to do now to get rid of him immediately. And then, I don't know, maybe they have a plan to do something. Maybe they're done after that. They'd have an open roster spot, obviously. Maybe Chris Paul is what they do with that open roster spot.
Yeah, I think they absolutely have a plan. I have to believe that they have a plan, and we can look at the avenues for what they're able to do. One thing that was just announced the other day, which I thought was interesting, is we'd been speculating for a while that they were going to sign Kobe Brea, the 41st overall pick, who, by the way, chose number 14. Did you see that? I thought that was very funny because we were jokingly comparing him to Landry Shamet. I mean, like, let's be honest, he's actually a very similar player, just in play style to Landry Shamet. Yeah, similar size, shooting being his main skill, talking about how, you know, he competes on defense, like is an intelligent defender, but probably not a very athletic one. And then he chooses number 14. I just thought that was funny.
He chose it for a cool reason. It's for his brother's birthday, which
he obviously was not like, I am going to pay homage
for my goat,
to
Landry Shamet,
to Suns legend Landry Shamet.
Shamet.
But I thought it was interesting that they officially announced, after we'd been speculating for a while, that Kobe Brea is getting another two-way contract next to CJ Huntley, and then they just announced the third guy. We'll get there at some point today. That opens up another full roster spot for them to potentially, you know, if they get out of both aprons and they have access to a full mid-level exception, yeah, they could give all that money to Chris Paul, but actually they could split it between two players because they're going to have two roster spots. And in addition to splitting an MLE, they are going to have Royce O'Neal and Grayson Allen together still, maybe Nick Richards too. If you're out of the aprons, not only can you aggregate those contracts, which we had talked about was a perk of getting out of just the second apron, but you can actually aggregate those contracts. By the way, I know all of this is still very boring, but it's just we have
it's so important. Like, this is actually what leads to championships, right?
We have to go through the rules of what they can actually do, right? So you can aggregate the contracts and take back money up to 125%, I believe it is, if you're out of the first apron. So at that point,
you can say you send out 10 million, you can take back 12 million or whatever, yeah.
Or say you send out 27 million in Grayson plus Royce plus a pick, and now you can take back like 33, and that's a big deal. That's a very big deal when you're talking about the types of players that the Suns acquire. I agree with you, for the record, Mike. I don't think that there is a world in which you can really say that waiving and stretching Beal isn't short-sighted. It is short-sighted because I think even if you take that MLE and you split it between two good players and then you trade for another $30 million player, I think they could do all that and they could be a very fun and good basketball team next year. I still don't think they're really like a contender on the level of OKC or probably even Houston and Denver. And so it's like, what's the point if we're still going to be talking about, 4 years from now, if Kaman Malawach and Rasheer Fleming are up for extensions and they're really good and half of the salary cap is taken up just in Devin Booker's contract and then $20 million of dead cap for Bradley Beal, then that's a really unfortunate scenario for the Suns. But I also, at the same time, I don't think this is like a totally catastrophic move that some people are playing it up to be either. I guess I'm just like, I can't force myself to have a super critical opinion of it at the same time. I think you feel worse on this than I do.
I probably do. But let me be clear, though. Bradley Beal was a terrible fit on this team before the Kevin Durant trade. He's a much worse fit now. This team, to play him, would be very difficult. They are a team consisting of 4 centers and 8 shooting guards right now. So like they kind of need to get rid of one of those and make room for a different kind of player. They need a point guard. They need more forwards. Like, that's just where this team is at in their current build and their current construction. So I understand the perspective of do what it takes to get rid of Bradley Beal. I think that the more you stack dead money onto the books, that is going to impact. Like, here's how I look at it. We're very lucky that Devin Booker is okay being on the Suns right now. We're very lucky. I think part of the reason he's okay being on this team right now is because you have to prove to him that there's a path to building a great team in the future. I think there's probably some level of understanding that this current team that they're about to put on the floor next year, as much as I'm excited, truthfully, excited about a bunch of the players on the team, I think there's probably a pretty good understanding by Devin Booker, who's been on a contender, who's been to the NBA Finals, that this is not that. That means there has to be some path for that coming in the future. The more you stack dead money onto that team in the future, the less of a chance you have to make that successful. It doesn't mean it's impossible. I won't say that it's impossible. But I think the more you stack the chips against yourself, the more difficult it becomes to do that, the higher the likelihood is that you end up losing Devin Booker in the future. Because, and only out of fairness to him, you have to prove that there's a path to contention in order to keep him. And I wouldn't, I'm not saying that Devin Booker's the type to ask out. He's very clearly not. I just think there is a point where you start taking advantage of that from his perspective, and I don't think that the Suns should make that a higher likelihood. The more they lose talent on this team, the more difficult it will be to create a good team in the future. So it's overly not exciting. But I from the other perspective though, I'm not going to miss Bradley Beal. I won't miss him.
Not at all.
So
not for one bit, and none of us do.
But I will also
There's not a single Suns fan who does.
I will also say I think he might be good on a team next year.
I
think there's a chance for that because he was such a bad fit on this team.
Two things can be true at once. I mean, Bradley Beal for an MLE somewhere else, or even like a taxpayer MLE, like he might go and sign for $5 million because not a lot of teams even have the full MLE, at least not the contending teams that he's interested in. And for anywhere from $5 to $15 million, yeah, we can all agree Bradley Beal is a steal. Unfortunately for the Suns, we just did not get to have him in that contract situation here, and so it's never going to work out. I do think it's interesting, like that trade the Clippers just made, for instance. They just got rid of Norm Powell, brought in John Collins. I think John Collins is a worse player than Norm Powell with the season that Norm Powell just had, although John Collins had a good season too. But if they can get Bradley Beal now, because that's apparently one of the teams Beal is deciding on, in the aggregate, Norm Powell said we're going to replace Paul George in the aggregate, and now it's Norm Powell being replaced in the aggregate for the Clippers. John Collins and Bradley Beal for the Clippers.
Yeah.
That would be a starting five of Harden, Beal, Kawhi. I mean, it's a really old
Collins and Zubac, yeah.
Collins and Zubac.
Look, Collins is still in his 20s, if I'm not mistaken. It's kind of hard to believe, but I'm pretty sure John Collins is still in his 20s.
Collins and Zubac are not the two that I'm worried about there. I would be worried about the James Harden, Bradley Beal backcourt holding up at all. Obviously, Kawhi too. And then, there would be defensive concerns, but still, it's talent at every position. You can't knock that. While you were talking, I also just wanted to bring up the current contract situations of players in the NBA. I'm sure you've done this already, but just looking at the players who do make roughly $25 to $30 million again, a lot of these guys would be really weird fits for the Suns, even if you could get them. Also Royce and Grayson by themselves don't have a lot of trade value. I think they have some value. I think they're solid players. But, how much could you really get without attaching some of the prospects you just drafted or other picks or whatever? Who knows? But, I don't know, some of these guys like Andrew Wiggins or Jeremy Grant or, if the Suns split an MLE and you could bring in both Chris Paul and Al Horford, who are two of the top free agents still out there right now, and then you trade Grayson and Royce for Jeremy Grant. You're not reacting.
I get at least I would say I would say that at least there is some sort of vision there. That's a very old team. You're talking about the Clippers being very old.
I don't think so, because I mean, Chris Paul and Al Horford are very old, but they've spent all summer so far getting really young, and now the average age of the team is like 24. And so I think they can now afford to add
Horford
a couple of veterans if they want.
Where would we play him? Are we starting him with Mark Williams?
Yeah, or he's your backup center.
Okay.
And then is he getting in the way of
Malawach?
Is he getting in the way of Malawach? Yes. I mean, like I this is why, like, you know, do they want to be good next year, or do they want to set a foundation for a really good team 3 or 4 years down the road? Right now the answer is kind of both, and we probably don't get to have our cake and eat it too. I'm really excited for Summer League. I'm really excited for these young guys to develop. If they want to also be good next year, they need to continue to acquire players who are going to play in front of these rookies who can be good next year.
Honestly,
we haven't even had a chance to address, like, I don't think we've recorded a real podcast since they signed Nigel Hayes-Davis. I think Nigel Hayes-Davis is interesting. That can't be your answer to starting power forward if you want to be good next year. It just can't.
Yeah. He's not tall enough. But
they got to figure it out.
No, it's true. They really do have to figure. I think right now we're staring down the barrel of starting Brooks and Dunn. Sorry for the pun. But yeah, I think we're staring down the barrel of starting both of those guys. And honestly, that's not the worst case. It's just not, for all the talk about being big next year, that's not very big. Now, let's just quickly recap some of the avenues, because I think this could happen soon. We're probably not going to record an emergency podcast if Bradley Beal is waived and stretched after this, because we're covering all aspects of it now on this podcast. But unless they do something with it right away. But I want to talk about all the avenues it potentially opens up for the Suns that they could use. So you're mentioning aggregating players. I think that's a really, really important one. You're aggregating Royce and Grayson, or even, like, honestly, Mark Williams. Maybe not right now. I'm not sure the aggregation rules in this new CBA for the offseason, but, like, you could potentially even trade him later. I'm not saying they should, but, like, if you're trading for a big that's more of a star big, maybe that's something that you're willing to do.
Could
or
still
Malawach
aggregate
shows
one
a
of
lot
those guys
right away, and you want to start Malawach. Like, honestly,
could still aggregate one of those guys with Jalen Green too, to get up to the, like, 45, 50. Like, if you wanted to get, I mean, right now they're playing it up like they really believe that Jalen Green is the number 2 to Devin Booker next year, but I think there would be a lot of people who would be more confident in like a quote unquote real number 2. And you could maybe go out and get that if you were able to flip Jalen Green after half a season of being Booker's backcourt partner. So, yeah, it just gives you more flexibility.
There's going to be teams that change, 5 months from now, from where they're at right now, where they might feel a little bit different.
Jalen Green and Grayson for Jaylen Brown to be Booker's number 2. I don't know. Like, something like that could be on the table after half a season. I wouldn't be surprised. So, who knows?
Yep. So aggregating, sending out cash in a trade, not saying that they're going to do this, but that is an option that opens up. You can't do that when you're in the second apron. And then 3, a big one, sign-in trades. The Suns can actually negotiate sign-in trades with the sign-in traded player coming back to the Suns. In this case, there's 2 restricted free agents that are still out there that have been coming up a lot in this conversation. Jonathan Kuminga and Josh Giddey. 2 players who each have their own things that don't excite me very much, but 2, at the very least, young players who are not currently signed by their teams, that if those teams, in particular, I think the Warriors, you can make the case, are interested in a sign and trade for somebody like Grayson Allen or Royce O'Neal, there's a world where you could work something out with them. Or in Chicago, I don't know how they feel about Josh Giddey. Maybe the price is too much for them, even in a way that actually works for the Suns, and they want somebody like Grayson Allen or Royce O'Neal, and you can try to work something out there instead. We don't have to go into a long conversation about how those players would fit on the Suns, but it is another avenue that is now open to the Suns once they're out of the second apron. If they're trying to find every avenue to improve, that's a sort of creative one where they could potentially find a player that's a little younger that could fit on this team longer term.
Giddey was, I don't know if I want to use the word exceptional, but like really damn good last season in Chicago, post All-Star break. Got to the free throw line more than he ever had in his career, shot the 3 better than he ever had in his career, and you would be projecting forward based on this 1-year sample in Chicago, which I understand that's scary, but the idea of a point guard who's like a great playmaker with size, who now can also like survive as a 3-point shooter and and give you just like a little bit of rim pressure in a way that he never did in OKC. I mean, look, that's really compelling compared to who Josh Giddey was, like, say, 18 months ago. I would be more into Giddey than Kuminga, for sure, between the two.
Yeah, on the court.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, I didn't. I mean, we're not talking about that. I didn't think about that.
Anything else on a Bradley Beal buyout? We'll talk about it more later after it happens, for sure. But, yeah. Anything else?
Well, like, where do you think he should go? Just from his perspective, like, one of the LA teams. He should
go to Milwaukee. He won't, though.
Why do you say he won't?
He doesn't seem to want to live somewhere cold.
I mean, that's true,
really
yeah.
it.
Maybe he doesn't want to live somewhere cold. But
that team is desperate for somebody who knows how to dribble. And like, for what they're able to pay, and it's not going to be much, truthfully, but for what they're able to pay, Bradley Beal would be a really good option for that. Now, maybe it's only 50 games a season or whatever, but no Damian Lillard. They're adding Miles Turner. They still have Giannis, and they have Kuzma. Like, he is what he is. But you factor in Bradley Beal onto that team. Now they have Miles Turner as their second best player, Bradley Beal as their third best player, and there's nobody really competing with what Bradley Beal does on that team. And they're in the East, which is like a much, much worse conference after all the injuries that they've sustained.
Yeah, that's the big thing for me. Like that team is clearly less talented than if you went to the Clippers with the starting five I just named 5 minutes ago. But in the East, just the Eastern Conference effect, Bradley Beal, if you're serious about winning, and I'm not sure he is, I was never sure that he was while he played for the Suns. But if he wants to win, I would say your best bet is in Milwaukee. Yeah, that team could compete in the East with the state of the East.
Yeah. So that's the way, the Clippers are another obvious choice, though. But is the Clippers the choice that you were thinking?
Yeah, probably. Or, Lakers is what everyone else is talking about.
Alchemy Roast is my favorite coffee. You've heard me talk about it time and time again, but it's time for you to go to alchemyroaster.com and try Alchemy Roast's coffee. Alchemy Roast is about more than just coffee. It's about passion, dedication, and community. They're a small batch roastery committed to sourcing the finest beans and mastering the art of the roast, and they do it ethically. It really is my favorite coffee, and I know those of you who listen all the time know I love coffee. You can get 10% off your order using the code TIMELINE at alchemyroaster.com. That's the code TIMELINE at alchemyroaster.com. Go on there, check out all their coffee. It's small batch coffee, so it's up to you to try as much of it as you can. They're only available for limited times, so go to alchemyroaster.com, check out what they have, make it as pour over, make it as espresso, make it in a drip machine. I've done it all. It all tastes great. All of it is good. Tanzanian beans right now. They have some on there. Peaberry coffee. I highly recommend it. There's a lot of other great coffee, but if you try that one, you know that I recommend it. It's really good. Once again, Alchemy Roast. Go to alchemyroaster.com. Use the promo code TIMELINE. Get 10% off. It also supports us here on the podcast, which we appreciate if you do. Let's talk about the fact that the Kevin Durant trade is actually official now. I think that's the place we should go to now, because honestly, this was Matty Tillum's legacy game. It was a 7-team trade. We talked about Matty Tillum being brought to the Suns to do multiple team trades, and this one actually ended up happening as a 7-team trade, which makes it the largest trade in NBA history as far as the amount of teams included. And Brian Gregory spoke about it. He even gave Matty Tillum credit. Did you hear that?
Of course. Yeah, no, I heard it, and I was glad to hear that. Because look, it's always nice when other guys, lower level executives, so to speak, get their credit from the general manager, but also just for our sake to know and have it confirmed that this is the guy who handles the financials. He was like, Matty Tellum, he's the guy who handles the financials, which we already assumed, but now we know. That is the guy who is running the salary cap. That is your CBA expert in the world of the new CBA. And so, yeah, this was a Matty Tellum construction, the 7-team aspect of it, it seems. And not really much else to say. Like, because it wasn't like
yeah.
a fun it was a 7-team trade, but it wasn't like a fun 7-team trade of here are 7 different starting caliber players who are moving from team to team.
It really was just the Suns, all of those second round picks that they got, they just found ways to send them over to the other teams in order to move up to get the Rushier Fleming, by the way, is how you say his name, in order to get the Fleming pick. So they combined all of those trades sort of into one massive trade that ended up going down. And what that allowed the Suns to do, obviously, was to announce the players that are now with the Suns, Dylan Brooks, Rasheed Fleming, and Kaman Malawach. So they're able to talk about that, of course, and then Houston, from their perspective, can celebrate Kevin Durant being on their team. And that led to the rookies being introduced. Let's talk about that first, and then I want to talk about the Brian Gregory press conference that happened later, because they sort of separated Brian Gregory talking about the rookies and then talking about the trades and the current state of the team in order to allow the rookies to have their own sort of press conference celebration, which the Suns, I think, pretty cutely did at the Scottsdale YMCA with a lot of kids there, part of the Young Suns group, and then the rookies played a little basketball with some of the kids there, which I thought was adorable. And so they introduced all 3 of the rookies on that day: Kaman Malawach, Fleming, and Kobe Brea.
You thought it was adorable when Ryan Dunn is spiking that ish off the backboard as a kid tries to go for a layup?
It'd be a fun memory, I think, for a kid to have, once he wins his third defensive
that was a real
player
clip.
Of the year.
That was a real clip. Go look it up if you didn't see it. Ryan Dunn was not going to let these kids score easily.
Shout out Dwayne.
That's what Brian Gregory was talking about. A team to make us proud on the defensive end. Not even the 8-year-olds are allowed to score.
Colin Gillespie, Oso Ighodaro, Ryan Dunn were there to support the rookies. Brian Gregory, of course, spoke first and did his thing, talking about how great of kids these are. He talked about trying to build a team that was gritty and smart, and he gave the credit, said not just these 3 guys sitting up here, those 3 guys sitting down there as well, in talking about Oso Ighodaro, Ryan Dunn, and Colin Gillespie, are hard workers, and he wants to build a team full of hard workers. And then, of course, we got Kaman Malawach, Rasheed Fleming. Once again, this is where I found out exactly how to say his name. And Kobe Brea talking after that. What was your first impression of these guys talking to our guys? I'm talking about Kellen. I'm talking about Gerald, Brendan, Dwayne.
Dwayne, yeah, it's nice to hear all those guys ask questions, obviously. I had heard them speak a little bit before. Malawach was interviewed on draft night. He seems awesome. I mean, they all seem cool, man. But Malawach just seems like a really humble guy with a firm head on his shoulders, who I think is just going to be an awesome pro from day one, just in terms of being a professional, getting in the gym early, and kind of trying to soak up advice from those around him. He's already talked about like the importance of Ryan Dunn and Oso being there as part of their summer league training camp, because those, it sounds funny to say, but like obviously those are the veterans, Ryan and Oso, for summer league as the guys with NBA experience, and just what they can teach Malawach and the rest of those guys about keeping their bodies right for a full NBA season, which is so much longer than anything you put your body through in college. So it's going to be an adjustment period for all of them, but yeah, he seems really cool.
I'm glad you started with Malawach because, first of all, Rasheed Fleming seemed like he's not going to have a great time talking to the press. He just seemed a little nervous, and it doesn't seem important to him, which I respect very much. Kobe Brea, very clearly been in college for a long time, very used to this, said all the right things, has that sort of Kentucky preparedness that they all come to the NBA with. But Malawach in particular, he's really young. He'll be one of the youngest players in the NBA. He's still a teenager. He is not yet 19. I don't know. Probably, I haven't looked up this entire draft class, but he's probably one of the youngest in this entire draft class. And
yeah, I'd say probably top 5, top 10 youngest.
Which will make him one of the youngest players in the league. And he speaks with a level of maturity that I just respect for somebody that's that young. We're going to see them in summer league soon. Hopefully on playback. We're going to see them in the NBA, of course, in the next few months. But right now, what we have is them speaking to the media, and I just really was impressed with him. He seems like a really smart, thoughtful guy for his age, for somebody who that young. And he seems to understand the moment, and he's like embracing it and soaking it in.
I mean, I don't know exactly how to say it, but frankly, he just had a different upbringing from most NBA prospects, and I think that forces you to grow up faster. He speaks with a maturity that, like, he made reference to, not in this interview, but in a different one, made reference to kind of just carrying all of Africa behind him in a way that, like,
he did say that on the draft. The entire continent of Africa, he said,
is behind him, which, I don't know if that's literally true, but I'm sure at least the country of South Sudan is behind him, and that's still a lot of people. So
you're saying he's not like one of those spoiled AAU kids, Sam? Is that what you're saying?
That's not literally how I'm wording it, but I do think, remember when Busy came here, and this is different because Busy, of course, is like 35 at this point, but Busy came here and is on an NBA minimum contract and then donated his entire contract to go build hospitals in the Congo. It would not surprise me. It would not surprise me if it, throughout his rookie contract, and I'm not saying he has to forego any of his money, but it would not surprise me if Maluach was like the type of guy who was just instantly, creating foundations and sending money overseas and giving back to his community, because really he seems to have that rare level of humility about the privilege that he has to play professional sports for a living.
He talked both at the press conference and after the practice about wanting to be able to contribute, and he mentioned defensively immediately. It's pretty clear. I mean, he kind of has to, like, this is just where the Suns are. They need him to, so it's great that he's saying the right thing, but I do think that he's the type of person that probably could. Rasheer Fleming, when he spoke, he said that in his college role, he played more of a 3-and-D type player.
Yeah, that was interesting.
And that he thinks that the guys on the Suns drafted him with the expectation that he can do more, and that he will be working with the coaching staff to try to push himself to see how much more he can do, which I think in particular, when you watch him, he really does project to be a 3-and-D player. There wasn't essentially any, in the highlights at least, self-creation, and based on what you read about him, there's not a lot of self-creation that you could really point at.
He took 6 mid-range shots last year.
Yeah,
in total.
It took very, but the spacing is different. The type of athleticism is different.
Well,
and maybe the Suns saw something that we didn't quite see, of course, in just watching the highlights. And I'm really curious if they can tap something there, because I'll be honest, a little doubtful, but I hope they could.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doubtful too. I think that's from our perspective as having only watched highlights of Rasheer. That's a faith-based argument, but maybe the Suns saw something. And from Fleming's perspective, you just went through a draft process where you watched yourself probably be compared a lot to guys like Cedric Coward or Carter Bryant, or guys who ended up going 10, 15, 20 spots ahead of you and are going to be making a lot more money on their rookie scale. By the way, the Suns came to an agreement with Rasheer Fleming, a 4-year deal, which you don't always see for second-round picks, 3 years guaranteed, and then a 4th-year team option. Excellent value for a guy that you get 31st overall, I thought.
Yeah, it's essentially a Ryan Dunn deal from what
exactly.
I
mean, we've been calling him a second first-round pick, and with a contract like that, he literally is. But also would not be surprised if he had a chip on his shoulder to say, I'm better than these other wing prospects who these NBA teams think can create off the dribble, and I can't for some reason, and I'm going to prove them wrong. Summer League will be a good opportunity for him to show a little bit of that, I don't know how much we're really going to expect, but a little bit of it.
I want to be clear about him, too. If he doesn't do that, he still could project to be a really great NBA player just by capitalizing on the 3-and-D, because he's going to be someone who can finish at the rim off ball, right? We're not going to say he's going to get driving to the rim, maybe occasionally in transition, but if he can finish at the rim off ball, set screens,
he'll be a high-level cutter. Yeah.
And high-level cutter. If he can hit threes and force the defense out to the perimeter, occasionally play center, which I believe he will, and then his defense translates to the NBA, first of all, he's going to make a few $100 million probably in the way that the NBA is going, because if that translates, he can still make a ton of money. He can still be really successful. So if his career still is high-level 3-and-D role player, that's a massive, massive success. But if they find a way to tap into something else there, then that's when you start talking about, I don't know, what is his ceiling and what could it potentially be. So we'll see with him. Kobe Brea, spoke as well. He talked about picking his number. By the way, Rasheer Fleming said that the reason he picked the number 20 is because he liked how it looked with his name, which is I love. It's just really funny. He said, I'm also 20 years old, but like that's why I picked it, which I think is
that's
funny.
Also what I do. Like if I create a my career or whatever in 2K, yeah. I don't have like I understand this is obviously no one gives a shit about your 2K player, but it's like I'm not thinking about like
it was aura
the significance behind it. You just pick a number. Like I like that. Just pick a number. So
he's picked his number based entirely on vibes. And who
was the last Sun to wear number 20? Was it Sharch? I'm not very good with remembering numbers.
Me neither.
To be honest,
I think of Josh Jackson, but yeah, I don't know. I hope he's better than that. But Sharch is kind of an interesting comparison for him. But the passing's not going to be there. But a small stretch 5 is kind of what he probably projects to be. Kobe Bryant, I talked about it, poised very clearly, good at talking about basketball, literally a dad. Like he's coming into the NBA as like an older rookie who already has a family, which is just kind of an interesting thing in comparison to the two guys sitting next to him, one 20-year-old who, played in college multiple years, and then one 18-year-old who is going to be one of the youngest players in the NBA. Kobe Bryant seemed like so much older than them already in his conversation, and he said everything that you kind of expect a guard out of Kentucky to say. He wants to contribute right away. He wants to work hard on defense. He believes in his skill, and the spacing in the NBA is going to help him out. What was your first impression of him?
Yeah, well, my first impression, I liked what he said in that presser. Kobe Bryant actually is the guy who I had seen speak the most because of that 1 hour video that he did. I watched that whole thing. Those other guys, I hadn't watched a full hour of them speaking to this point, right? So I think Bray is really intelligent with the way he analyzes the game. He is like by far, let's just call it what it is, the guy with the biggest uphill battle to establish himself in the NBA by virtue of the fact that he is only signed to a 2-way contract for this year, right? So he's going to spend a lot of time in the G League, but I also hope the Suns find ways to incorporate him, like get him big league run. And if they want to do that, they're probably going to have to continue to clear up this shooting guard logjam, right? Because I think he's going to be ready for it. I think he's going to be ready. I think Jordan Ott is going to really like working with him because he's one of the few guys on the roster who really projects as that level of movement shooter and gives him a lot of options coming off of pin downs. Also being, Gregory just again stressing the importance of off-ball movement, the importance of cutting as a means of getting to the basket. So, yeah, I like Kobe Bryant. But we'll see. He's going to have like a green light in Summer League, I think.
I'm very excited to see.
He's going to take a lot of... We should just talk about the Summer League roster for a minute.
That's exactly where I wanted to go next. But yes,
okay,
I do.
Fantastic.
And, just thinking about him, there's a lot of screening on this team right now with the way they're going to play. Because just talking about the roster, they have, obviously, Kaman Malawach, who's massive. But Rasheer Fleming is a screener. Like, he played that screening role, including dribble handoff type screening, in college, so he's going to be able to screen for him as well. CJ Huntley, who we've talked about in the past, essentially the same size as Rasheer Fleming, so another guy that big. But the great news for the Suns, Oso Ighodaro also playing, Ryan Dunn also playing Summer League. So we're talking about a roster that includes Kaman Malawach, Kobe Bryant, Rasheer Fleming, Oso Ighodaro, Ryan Dunn, and CJ Huntley, who's going to be on a
6 guys who are guaranteed to be, 6 guys, like if you include the 2-way contracts, that's 18 roster spots. 18 roster spots of guys who are guaranteed to be at training camp, right? How much big league run will CJ Huntley get? I really don't know. Probably not much if we're making bets. But 18 guys who are going to be at training camp, 6 of those guys are going to be at Summer League. That's a big deal. That's a bigger commitment to like the Summer League roster from the Suns than we've seen in 5, 6, 7 years easily. Like a couple years ago, we were talking about Toumani Camara as the only guy on the entire Summer League roster, and maybe Ish Wainwright was there again, right? It was like we've come a long way from Ish Wainwright and Toumani Camara to having a serious presence at Summer League that I think they can compete. And by the way, one other guy that I love on this roster is because we talked about the fact a lot of these guys, we hope that they can self-create, but they don't have maybe that requisite experience, right? And we said this Summer League roster needs not just a point guard. They need a pass-first point guard if they can find one, a guy who's not so concerned with like getting his 15, 20 shots, but knows that he's going to be there to make the other guys look good. And they absolutely nailed that by getting Yuri Collins, who played for the Warriors G League affiliate in San Jose the last 2 years. He played at St. Louis before that. He's a little bit undersized, a 6-foot point guard, but averaged like 10, 11 assists per game at the college level. Averaged
perfectly
14
sized for summer league, to be honest.
Oh, sure, yeah. And 14 points, 11 assists per game for the Warriors G League affiliate last year. Like, this is the perfect guy to play 25 minutes a game for your summer league team and just like ensure that you are running sets and other guys are going to look good. You're going to play out of the pick and roll. You're going to make guys look good in transition. I think they nailed that one just for creating a positive infrastructure for the entire team.
Who starts?
I think
what do
it's
you think they do? Do you
that's
think they just
interesting.
put the 5 guys?
No, I don't
Like,
think so.
do
I
they
think-
just start Oso Ighodaro at point guard?
I don't think so. So the other thing I would note, Oso and Malawach are the only centers. The roster has 15 guys. Malawach and Oso are the only ones listed at center. There are a couple other guys who could play center. They have like Solomon Young is a really big forward who's like legit. I know we said this about Nigel Hayes Davis and then realized that it wasn't true. Solomon Young is a forward who's actually 250 pounds, so he could play center. But they only have
Moses
two.
Wood
Like
too, I think.
Yeah, Moses Wood was with them last year I don't remember. Was he at Summer League or was he was at training camp for sure. So Moses Wood is a returning player for the Suns. But I think Yuri Collins has to start because of what I just said. You want a guy who's just like a table setter.
So then
Brea?
who sits is the question. Is it going to be Oso?
I know.
I think it has to be Oso.
But here's the thing. Like for Oso, to me, Oso and Dunn are there to develop camaraderie with the guys who you know are going to be on the roster, and they're there to set good habits, maybe show a little bit off in their own games that stuff they didn't have last year. At the same time, they don't really have much to prove. Like Oso and Dunn, to me, don't have to play more than 15 minutes a game in Summer League. Because what are they really there to prove? You know? Do you disagree with that?
Well, just from the perspective of wanting to see them play a lot.
I want to see them play a lot too.
I just want to see it, but I don't disagree with strategically what you're saying.
Oso doesn't need to start for me, and so I guess that makes it Yuri Collins, Brea, Dunn, Fleming, Malawach, with Oso and Huntley as like both off the bench as this supersized front court. I think that's kind of what you'd be looking at.
But
they could go super big sometimes.
Just from the perspective of who was drafted higher, Oso Ighodaro has to go to the bench in this case. I want to see Fleming. I guess I want to see Fleming and Malawach play at the forward and center position in that starting lineup. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter. I was just curious what you thought.
You could also go.
The other option is Fleming goes to the bench and Oso and Malawach start together.
Well, and you could definitely bench Kobe Brea because Brea's a shooting guard, so that's why I slotted him in there. But you could just play Dunn at the 2, Fleming at the 3, Oso at the 4, Malawach at the 5.
Every rebound, yeah.
No, you could literally start like that, and like Oso is like, are you a spacing threat? Not exactly, but are you going to be gritty?
Guard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to be gritty. So they could do that too. I don't know. It's going to be fun. They're in it to win it this year. Like, it's really exciting. Summer League. I would highly encourage everyone to watch in a way that, like, the last few Summer Leagues for the Suns, if 90% of the fan base just tuned it out, I would have understood. This one, I think we're all going to have a lot of fun.
First game is on Friday. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that's on ESPN. Yes, it is on ESPN. So Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern, so 6 here in Phoenix on July 11th. ESPN. You want to watch that on playback?
I was going to ask you, I'm down to watch them on playback in theory. Aren't a couple of them, I don't have the schedule in front of me, aren't some of them on like ESPN University or like some of the weird channels? I
ESPN,
don't know.
ESPN2, NBA TV, and ESPN. Let's see. I don't know. We can double check, but yeah.
Okay. I don't know if we can watch all of those on playback for the record, but if we can, we'll do it. And yeah, people can join us and
Worst case scenario, people watch at home while we talk. Yeah.
Exactly. People watch at home while we talk. We can do that. We've done that before. One other thing I want to say about the Summer League roster before we get there, I don't know the last time they weighed all of these guys. Like if this is literally a training camp weigh-in that they did yesterday and then they posted these numbers. I just think some of these numbers are interesting. Rasheer Fleming is listed at 232 pounds. That makes him already heavier than both Ryan Dunn and Oso. Oso was listed at 227. So I thought that was kind of fascinating. Just speaking to the NBA readiness of Fleming in year one, and also a little bit to like, we know that Oso is undersized for a center, but Fleming is really, really NBA ready. And then Malawach is closer to 240. That one guy, Solomon Young, that I mentioned is like 245.
Yes,
I just think they did a really good job constructing this roster, because even the guys who are not going to be able to compete for a two-way spot, because now we know that there aren't any two-way spots available. Some of these guys are probably going to sign with, they could sign Exhibit 10 deals, they could be in training camp, or they could end up on the Valley Suns. And every body type is covered here, right? There are small guards, there are big guards, there are really stocky wings, and there are tweener type wings. And so I just think they did a good job of covering all their bases and giving us a roster that has an identity on the court of defense and whatever, but also covers all their bases of the physicality.
Let's talk about Brian Gregory, because after this introduction, they went to their first sort of training camp practice for the Summer League. And Brian Gregory and some of the rookies spoke after that practice, but I think the Brian Gregory press conference portion of this conversation was, I think, more of the interesting things that you can take from, because he did not want to talk about the Kevin Durant trade or even the Mark Williams trade at the rookie press conference, but was willing to speak about it. Because it was just official, we haven't really had a chance to hear him talk about these guys and talk about what the team could potentially be. So shout out once again to our boys, Gerald, Dwayne, Kellen, whoever else was there. I forget who was there talking to them here. I have a couple things that I took from this that I found really interesting. But is there anything that stood out to you in Brian Gregory speaking at this practice?
I pointed out one thing on Twitter yesterday just about him highlighting how they were really bad at getting to the rim in the past, and they've wanted to improve that. And the way to improve that is either get guys who drive there themselves, guys who cut there off ball, or guys who attack the offensive glass. And so although he didn't mention any of the players they've acquired by name, although he did mention Jalen Green, other than Jalen Green, he didn't mention the players they've acquired by name. But I just think like it speaks to this consistent, coherent strategy that they've had this summer of, you can obviously tell all of the players that they've acquired have been good at one of those three things, and have fit under this umbrella vision of, we're going to be more athletic, but we're also going to be smart basketball players. Some of these guys, I have more faith in their ability to do that than others. I want to believe in Jalen Green's ability to get to the rim. In fact, I do. I do believe in Jalen Green's ability to get to the rim in theory. I still think his shot chart has to go through a significant makeover in order for him to be the type of player who really helps the Suns succeed as early as this year. But yeah, I thought, that was interesting. What did you have?
Well, let's talk about that real quick, and then I want to talk more about Jalen Green, but drives per game. Let's talk about drives per game. So last year, number one on the Suns in drives per game, I think you can guess, right? Booker with 14 drives per game. Number two, you would think that it would be Bradley Beal. I think probably the combination of him not playing enough minutes and maybe being a little unsure of his role meant that he wasn't number two. By the way, Booker,
do you happen
the
to
top
know
20 in drives
in the
per
NBA?
game, Booker.
That's amazing synergy, man. I was going to ask you that exact question. I was I was about to bring up, who averages the most drives, just for some context.
He's just for context. He's just under Cam Thomas, Darius Garland, Tyrese Maxey, who are around the same as him, just above Tyler Hero, DeJounte Murray, Jalen Williams, Franz Wagner, who drives a lot. So that's the players that he's sort of around. Of course, at the very top is SGA, Jalen Brunson, Zion Williamson, Cade Cunningham, Trae Young, Ja Morant. Luka Doncic.
Think about how interesting it is that Booker was the drives leader for the Suns, and he was below not just SGA, who obviously is at the top. He was below Jalen Williams, who was the number two for OKC. That just speaks to how rim pressure heavy OKC's offense was last year, and starkly different to what the Suns were doing.
Number two on the Suns, Kevin Durant, 10.5 drives per game. I'm not sure if you saw me post this in Discord. Do you know how many Jalen Green had per game?
No, I don't.
10.5, exactly the same as Kevin Durant.
Okay.
Which I just find interesting because if you think about sort of how we're wish casting him into this role as someone who needs to drive and get to the rim, you would have thought, based on his skill set alone, there would be more there. Now, I will say, in comparing the types of drives and how the drives end between Kevin Durant and Jalen Green, you can guess, but they're dramatically different endings of those drives. If Jalen Green's driving, the likelihood of that ending in a shot at the rim, much higher, whereas with Kevin Durant, either a pass or a pull-up shot, sort of in the short mid-range, is much, much, much more likely. But 10.5 drives per game, exactly the same as Kevin Durant. If he continues to do that, it doesn't really increase the rim pressure from the drives. Now, you talked about the other ways, cuts. Now, you just need smart guys and good passing to get cuts at the to end with shots at the rim. And then offensive rebounds, they're going to be a much better offensive rebounding team just based on the guys they have on the team next year. So that will increase that way. But Jalen Green has to dramatically increase his drives per game. We'll still probably get more shots at the rim just based on how those drives end. But that number, I'd like to see it a lot closer. Truthfully, it should be higher than Devin Booker's. But, Devin Booker having more ball skills likely will result in him getting more drives per game there. I just thought, I wanted to look at the stats. I really thought it would be higher. Did you think that would be a higher number as well?
Yes, I did. I mean, but I didn't think it would be like, approaching 15 or 20 or anything, just because I know the assist numbers are what they are, and guys who drive, even if Jalen Green is not likely to pass out of his drives compared to some other players, the more drives you get, the more assists you're going to get. That's just going to happen. Dump offs will present themselves. Passes out to shooters will present themselves. But yeah, the big thing for me is this horrible mid-range percentage that we've talked about with Jalen Green a little bit. I'm not sure if we've talked about it on a main feed episode yet, or if that's mostly been reserved for Patreon. But 30 to 40% of this guy's shots are mid-range shots that he converts at a 35% clip.
Which is the lowest at that volume in the NBA.
Yes, literally. It's Russell Westbrook bad. Well, actually, Russell Westbrook bad is 30%. Russell is unprecedentedly bad. But Jalen Green is not much better. And so we need to get that number way down. He needs to be taking pull-up threes early in the shot clock, use hezzies and the threat of that pull-up three, the more he's taking those, to then
get to the line.
Attack the off foot of his defenders, drive, get to the line, finish at the rim, dump off pass to Malawach or whoever's sitting in the dunker spot. But the mid-range shit, that has to go. It's not good basketball. It wasn't good basketball in Houston. It's not going to be good basketball here. I'm sure Jordan Knott's going to be telling him that on day one of training camp, but I'm here to tell the fans that too, that we don't want to see it. We don't want to see it. It would be nice if he could be Devin Booker, who shoots 50% on mid-range and had a super smooth, silky release and a high release point where he just kind of effortlessly floats in the mid-range area. Jalen Green's not that player, and we have 4 years of experience at this point to say he's not that player. He can still be a bona fide elite scorer at the NBA level, but he has to do it in a different way. Think Donovan Mitchell, think Anthony Edwards, some of these other young star players who have kind of evolved their scoring profiles over the past few years. If Jalen Green does the same thing, then that combined with him locking in on defense in a way that he never has, that would say he has a real chance of living up to his $30+ million contract and more for me.
To be a superstar, to be a star, you have to score at all three levels. But to be an effective NBA player right now for Jalen Green, just do well at two levels, at the rim and at the three-point line. And I will give credit once again to Gerald and Brendan, who both asked Brian Gregory about the fit between Jalen Green and Devin Booker. And this is the part that really stood out to me. Because, Gerald, how do you envision that fit is what he asked Brendan. I love the way Brendan worded the question. He said, Bradley Beal and Devin Booker didn't work. What makes you think it's going to be different about Jalen Green?
I mean, it really is effective wording because, I mean, look, if you're a reporter, you don't necessarily want to get you don't want to piss them off too much, but you do want to put them on the back foot, on the defensive a little bit because it's a question that needed to be asked.
Exactly. And, Brian Gregory leaned on one thing over and over again in talking about this, playing fast. He talked about it multiple times. He thinks they're going to be faster That's how he described it. And look, I've complained a lot about Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal gets down in transition. He runs in transition. In the half court, he does not play fast. But the implication in the way that Brian Gregory was talking about this was pace related to me. He's talking about the Suns playing extremely fast. If you think about there being some level of hesitation in playing Chris Paul or in signing Chris Paul, this could be one of the reasons. He wants to play extremely fast. The idea of a Devin Booker team playing fast relative to the rest of the NBA, because I think that's an important place to say it, relative to the rest of the NBA, is sort of interesting. Do you know what I did, Sam? I went back. I looked at every year of Devin Booker's career and where the Suns ranked in pace in those years, and I found some interesting results. Last year, 24-25, the Suns were not fast. Kevin Durant didn't really like to play fast anyway, so that's not much of a surprise. 21st in pace. 23-24, part of the Frank Vogel glow-up. They were 15th in pace. That's the fastest of any Kevin Durant season for the Suns, of course. 22-23, they were 22nd in pace. That's a weird team. Ended poorly. That's the one that they traded for Kevin Durant at the trade deadline. Kind of a weird season to look at. 21-22, which we'll remember as
Chris Paul
a Chris
era.
Paul season. And also, what else happened? They won 64 games.
Mm-hmm.
8th in pace. I mean, just pointing it out. They were 8th in pace that year. Relative to the rest of the league, they were in the top 10.
You know what I can't remember?
24th. The only other time since they were trying to be good that they were top 10 in pace was the bubble season, 1920. They were 9th. I will say early in his career, 16-17 and 17-18, when he was really young, they were 2nd in pace both of those years. But, you know, that was just a young team who wasn't trying to win. They were running really fast.
So 64 win season, you know, you're going to have to jog my memory a little bit. Hopefully you remember. Cam Payne was on the team,
yes.
right? That he was the backup point guard. Was
yes.
there a significant... I honestly cannot remember. Was there a significant difference in pace? Because eye test would say yes, but sometimes the statistics just like, you know, are different. Was there a significant difference in pace between the Chris minutes and the Cam Payne minutes?
That's a good question. I can check that right
I would
now.
say from memory, absolutely. Like that pace is a function of Cam coming in and like just jacking it up. The pace, I mean, not necessarily shots. But honestly, the statistics might not bear that out. I can't remember.
All right. I am checking right now. Let's see. When Cameron Payne was on the floor, the Suns played at a 102.83 pace, which is very fast.
That's very
So that
fast.
will support your claim. When Chris Paul was on the floor, 100.1. So multiple possessions faster, which is...
Yeah, 2 possessions faster, but like honestly, not crazy.
But 2 possessions faster, as far as rank, like compared to the relative to the rest of the league, can move you from like 25th to top 10. So that is a dramatic difference in pace. But yes, doesn't feel that way in just looking at the numbers. But yeah, it was faster when Cameron Payne was on the floor. But I do think Chris Paul, who played faster, it was 101 approximately when he was on the Spurs this last season. I do think Chris Paul can play faster. But we're also talking about a guy who will be 41 by the end of the year. If the Suns sign Chris Paul, you know, he's not going to play 35 minutes a game anyway. So if it slows down a little bit when Chris Paul is playing and he plays 18, 17 minutes a game, it's probably fine. Chris Paul, by the way, said that this will be his last season in the NBA.
Can I just ask you again?
Back to Jalen Green, yes.
Okay, I'll ask you when we wrap up this conversation. I have a tangent.
So just from the perspective of how are they going to fit, and the answer being they're going to play a lot faster, I don't think that's bad. I think that's smart. I do think they need to play faster if they want to capitalize on having a bunch of athletes on the team. Now, how good that will make them, if that is the solution to them being good, I think once you start playing good teams that aren't going to let you play fast, how they perform in the half court is where they're going to suffer. They need to be successful in the half court. And if you're really looking at this team right now, if you're really looking at the current state of the team, and they can make changes, don't get me wrong, but without Chris Paul and starting an offense that is run by Jalen Green and Devin Booker, and one guy running the offense off the bench is Colin Gillespie on his first ever NBA contract, what are they going to do when Devin Booker misses games? How are they going to run an effective offense in the half court without Devin Booker? I don't see a path for them doing that without Chris Paul. Of course, I'm saying, you know, if you get Chris Paul, obviously there's some sort of path there, but they don't have anyone else that can effectively do it. You know, I understand the concept of this fit, but Jalen Green can't run an offense. That's not his goal. He needs to be sort of an off-ball guy.
Yeah, I mean, he can run an offense just like mediocrely. He can run an offense. Yeah. It depends on what your goal is. Like, do you really think that, I would ask, do you really think that this season the Suns are going to be capable of like winning the non-Devin Booker minutes?
It's a great question, and the answer is definitely no.
It's a great goal to have in your mind, but I agree with you. The answer is definitely no. I just don't really see a path forward. So, like, again, this kind of does connect to what I was going to say. Well, first of all, you know, again, you can go out and acquire a different number 2. They can still do that now that they're going to have the ability to
not a ton of assets
contracts.
to do that, though, Sam. You know,
I don't know.
Are you willing to put Ryan Dunn in one of those trades, for example?
I don't want to, but they could.
Yeah. I'm just, you know, that's kind of
You
what
want Zion? You want Zion on this team? Yeah. It wouldn't be that hard. It would not be that much of a stretch for them to just say, take Grayson, Royce, Nick Richards, and a pick. Can they trade a first-round pick still?
No, they can't.
No, they can't trade a first-round pick.
Yeah.
Okay, well, trade something. Trade Oso. I don't know, something. And they could get Zion. That's a guy you can run an offense through. Are they going to be good? I don't know. Are they going to have awesome dunks? Yes, they would. What I was going to ask you is this MLE that they're going to have, if they don't just want to pocket all the tax savings, because, of course, once you have access to an MLE, that's more money that you're now, you know, spending.
And by the way, stretching Bradley Beal will be tax motivated. We can talk about that after it happens, but there's going to be some motivation of that there. Yeah,
there's some there. Yeah, I don't think like Chris Paul doesn't deserve a full MLE, and you're gonna have 2 roster spots.
Do they even have the full MLE? I don't think I haven't done the math on this yet. I don't think they do.
Oh, that's a great point. They probably don't. Well, they'll be under the first apron, but still over the. Yeah, they'll have a taxpayer MLE.
They'll have the taxpayer MLE, and I'm not even sure that they have the full taxpayer MLE after that.
They might still be able to. Might still be able to split that into 2 guys.
Yeah, maybe.
You might still be able to get Boucher, my guy. You might still be able. You could just forego Chris Paul and say, campaign, come back. He's still out there.
Yeah, he plays.
There's still over 100 guys on the market right now in free agency. It's moving very slowly.
Campaign was my number 2 as far as point guards we can get on this team. That's still a guy that I would like. I think he probably still has a house here, if I'm not mistaken, or he can stay at Cam Johnson's. They're still friends. Cam still has a house out here. But yeah, I don't know. There are some options for this team. Don't get me wrong. By the way, since we're just cresting over an hour here on our recording, we should mention Isaiah Livers was also signed to a 2-way contract for the Suns. There's another new player on the Suns, who, by the way, and we have to point it out. He went to Michigan, and he's a Mark Bartelstein client.
And he's from Michigan. He's a Kalamazoo, Michigan native. Do you know anything about Kalamazoo, Michigan?
It sounds like a fake place, but
I don't. But I was going to say I've heard of it before. It does sound like a fake place.
Yeah.
Let me look up the population. I think Kalamazoo is like a real city.
Yeah, I think so too. But yeah, and he's coming off of an injury, so didn't play much last year. Was on the Detroit Pistons, which, by the way, spending his entire career in Michigan, kind of cool. For him, but obviously going to a team that is Michigan motivated in the Phoenix Suns right now. Now, although it is, I think it seems there's a reason to at least raise your eyebrow at the concept of signing a client of the CEO's dad, who also went to the college that the CEO went to. I think there is a little bit of a raising your eyebrow to that. I don't think there's anything wrong with signing Isaiah Livers just from overall perspective. I don't think he's been very good. I don't think he's contributed a lot to the NBA, but also you don't get guys like that on a 2-way contract regardless. And the idea of him potentially coming off an injury and developing into something, I think is enough of a risk to take when it comes to a 2-way contract. And I'm not sure how good he could potentially be, but he's a forward. He's 6'7". He has had some history of shooting relatively well in the past, and maybe there's something there if you can get all that to coalesce.
Career 30. Yeah, it's hard to look at these guys because, you know, he played like a few hundred minutes each season, so the sample sizes are small. But if you look at it collectively, 36% from 3 in his career, so that's very solid. Very, very good free throw shooter in college, and he brought that to the NBA as well. He's a big wing who shoots threes. You know, like, the mold there is obvious. He's 6'7", 230 pounds. I will say, like, he missed all of last season due to a hip injury, and specifically had this like hip resurfacing surgery that I'm not a doctor. I don't know anything about. I guess they must have medically cleared him, but my first question about this guy is just like, what does he look like on defense in 2025 as a guy with hip issues? Would be my question. But in theory, he plays the part of an NBA body who shoots threes, and that's something that's always going to be needed.
Yeah. Congratulations to him. We'll see. You know, these two-way guys, I think the guy who has the best chance of potentially playing a role on the Suns at any time this year is, ironically, the guy who's probably the most behind in the rotation because of the amount of shooting guards the Suns have in Kobe Brea, just because the Suns obviously moved up to get him and have some sort of goal to work with him in the future. And he has one like outstanding potential NBA skill that could really, if the Suns struggle to shoot this year, they could really find a way to potentially put him in some lineups, especially as a movement shooter. Defensively, I'm not exactly sure that's going to translate to the NBA, but if he can do the other stuff well, maybe you can insulate him enough to make successful lineups with him in it. But yeah, last story actually too. Darvin Ham is currently coaching in Milwaukee, I believe, back in Milwaukee. But there is rumors that the Suns are interested in bringing in Darvin Ham as an assistant for Jordan Ott. Jordan Ott was an assistant for Darvin Ham in Los Angeles in the past. Obviously, they have probably a pretty good working relationship. A swapping of roles, of course, is what would happen here. But there has been rumors that the Suns are interested in a head coach to be the lead assistant for Jordan Ott in the past. We've mentioned Steven Silas as one of those guys that's been rumored. And now I believe from Mark Stein, we have Darvin Ham as a rumor as well. Darvin Ham, famously, supposedly a great assistant coach, struggled a little bit as a head coach in Los Angeles. Maybe got a little bit of undue blame. But yeah.
Not particularly well liked among Lakers fans. That being said, how many former Lakers coaches really are, especially in the last 15 years. But yeah, I prefer this to Steven Silas, no doubt, don't you?
Yeah, I think
just as a name.
Track record wise, he has a better track record. I think Steven Silas is probably a perfectly fine assistant coach as well. I'm not going to blame all of the Houston Rockets struggles when he was the head coach on him, although he didn't do very well. That team wasn't exactly built to win at that time anyway, so it's difficult to really figure out how good he was supposed to be in that scenario. But yeah, I mean, it's fine. I think Darvin Ham has a good reputation with players for the most part, so if that's somebody that they get, I would not be upset with that. And we'll see if that ends up happening. Obviously he's currently under contract in Milwaukee. I believe there's another team that was interested in him as well, so if this is something the Suns can pull off, I think for somebody like Jordan Ott, having somebody he is comfortable with and familiar with is probably would be good for him. So we'll see if that ends up happening.
One obvious connection that I need to make, not even because of the Ishbia aspect of it, but it's just funny to me. Booker always talks about how his favorite team growing up were the, what would you call them? The 04-05 Pistons.
Yeah.
God, oh my God, what do we call that team? I don't know. The Richard Hamilton, Chauncey Billups, Ben Wallace. Everyone knows who I'm talking about.
The only NBA team to win a championship without a working offense. Basically, is how we refer to them.
83 points per game. It's easy to forget, but Darvin Ham was on that team. It was the tail end of his career, and he was getting like 8 minutes a game. But he was on that team, and so that's just kind of a funny connection to me. For it to come all around, and now he gets to coach Devin Booker.
That would be really interesting. Yeah, I didn't think about that. But yeah, you got anything else before we go here?
No, I think that's it. Like you said, if just Beal is waived and stretched in the next 24 hours, I think we covered that aspect of it. So don't expect an emergency podcast. If, however, they then immediately turn around and like sign a guy or two with the MLE or make a trade now that they can aggregate contracts, then yes, of course, expect a podcast from us soon.
I think two things to expect in the next, not to be Gambo here, 24 to 48 hours. A Bradley Beal buyout, a Devin Booker extension. We'll talk about the Devin Booker extension in the future. Obvious, you have to do it. But yeah, that's something you can expect too. But yeah, thanks everyone for listening. Sorry we didn't have any extreme news to talk about, but we had a lot to talk about on this episode. If you want to join our Patreon, patreon.com/thetimeline. I'm sure we'll have something up in the next few days for that as well. And of course, you can join our Discord and talk about the Suns there. Thanks everyone.